Please be seated. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. My grandfather, who I never met, Henry Jones, whose picture is up there, he was a navigator during World War II, and he flew planes from Canada to the United Kingdom from 1940 onwards. And he has, if you look, he has a number of medals: Atlantic Star, Africa Star, Canadian Volunteer Service Medal, Air Observer's Badge. Anyhow, he later went on to become an attorney and a politician. He was actually a member of Parliament for Saskatchewan in Canada, in Ottawa. So he lived half the year in Ottawa, half the year in Saskatoon. And he once headed the Canadian NATO delegation to Paris. And I actually found out for the first time a few weeks ago that he was the parliamentary secretary for veteran affairs. So he was the second person in charge. And he was actually being groomed for great things. And people thought he could be a defense minister, maybe even prime minister of Canada, but he died young of cancer and never realized any of that. But anyway, I recently looked him up, and found that the Parliament in Canada records all the speeches through all the years, and you can look up what people say and what he said, and a lot of it's quite boring. But what was interesting was that after he died, there were all the comments that were made in Parliament about him. And I was really struck by what they said and the tone of the political discourse in those years, how different it is than today. But everybody, so many people stood up to eulogize the honorable member of Parliament that he was, and that he was an up-and-coming politician with so much to give, but his life was cut short, and his contributions were not what they could have been. And at the time that he passed away, his party was not in power, the other party was in power. But from the other side of the aisle, people went out of their way to make these warm and polite, dignified comments about him, and beautiful tributes to his war service and condolences to his family. And so what it made me think of was how war, for everything that it is, and the spirit of service, really should elevate people to be their best selves, and to reach out across divides, and to be generous of spirit, even with those who on some level are enemies. And how war, in one sense, is really one of the ugliest parts of humanity and brings out the worst in us, the most basic, the most primitive, fear and hate and vengeance and killing. And it takes away a person's aspirations and ideals far too quickly. They suddenly disappear and brings destruction and death. And I thought of that this week with, I don't know if you followed the story, what happened in Amsterdam over the last day, where mobs were running after Israeli soccer players and attacking them in the most violent way possible. And that yet somehow, on the other hand, that serving one's country and serving others by putting one's life into danger on the line is so powerful and so beautiful. And we hope it doesn't have to happen, because when the dangers and losing so many people in the prime of their lives and leaving families devastated and relationships cut short and leaving our society without some of its brightest members, but somehow it also has the power in the midst of all that ugliness to force out the best of people and to transform the lives of those who are serving. In our parsha this week, Abraham goes to war, and because his nephew Lot is kidnapped by some kings. Lot had settled in one of the most fertile areas at the time, but there's an alliance of kings against him. And so Abraham goes to war. Abraham, 75 years old, goes to war with his household, and he gets his nephew back. And in the end, he comes together with Melchizedek, who's a king of another kingdom who joined him, was an ally of Abraham. And And at the end of it, they have this beautiful moment where they thank God, El Elyon, the highest God. I don't know who he worships, but they together, and they have their first kiddush. They share a little glass of wine, they say a little prayer, and they have this moment of recognition that God helped keep them alive amid all the horrors. And one of my favorite things to do over the past year of the war in Israel has been to look at the Facebook posts of a member of Knesset, no longer a member of Knesset, but once was Dov Lipman. He's a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox member of the Knesset, American-born, and he made it his mission to post inspiring stories from the war in Israel. And so just a few days ago, he posted a story of two brothers who were both spent almost the entire year in reserves, and not knowing it, suddenly met in Lebanon in a house and spent a few hours together and took a picture of it. Amazing. And one of my favorites, a video of a returning reservist who looks to be at least in his 30s, if not 40s, with a mustache and everything. And he comes up to a religious musician who's playing with a hat out in the streets of Jerusalem, an older Hasidic man, and he asks him, "Can I grab the microphone?" So he grabs the microphone and he starts to sing, and he has a beautiful voice, and he's singing the Psalms. I lift my eyes up to the mountains, from where will my help come? And he sings it with such feeling, and you can't help but think, what battle was he coming back from that he went and took this microphone and started to sing this song of faith and devotion. A final story that was posted by Dov Lipman of a lone soldier from America. Maybe he wasn't from America, maybe he was from Argentina, I can't remember. Anyhow, he posts a post in Facebook, I'm looking for a used car when he's not on duty. And some couple came to him and gave him a car in gratitude for his service. Those kind of stories warm the hearts. And that's often in the midst of war, there's all these other things happening. My grandfather, when he was serving, once he was in the streets in Egypt, and he picked up 2 Shabbos candle sticks to give to a family member. And one of the stories he always told was of being in a pub after the war and also talking to someone who liberated the camps, and how powerful that was, and how beautiful service is, and sacrifice is noble, and it's the core of our humanity. It brings out the core of who we are. And to remember our loved ones who serve also reminds us of what it means to live with that nobility, how we can emulate them, even if it's not by going to war. But we can walk in their ways and do our part to help all those who put their lives on the line. And to remember that the only way to respond to darkness in the world is to bring a little bit of light ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.